Can you imagine being alive, yet unable to move? To feel your body rot away, while your mind remains awake trapped within a cage of metal and memory? Can you imagine hearing your own heartbeat replaced by the groan of servos, the hiss of hydraulics, the endless murmur of machine spirits whispering through your skull? For most, death is the end. But in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, it's only the beginning. There are countless horrors in the galaxy, daemons that eat souls, Xenos that feast on worlds, heretics that tear reality apart. But none of them can match the slow, eternal torment of a living tomb. A dreadnought. They call it an honor. They say it's a gift to be interred in the sarcophagus of a dreadnought, to serve the emperor beyond death. But those who have truly heard the whispers of the entombed, those who've stood near the resting vaults of these ancient war machines when the lights dim and the air hums with static, they tell another story. They say the dreadnoughts dream. They dream of war, of screams, of the last moments before the cold took them. They dream of being human again and of the moment they forgot how that felt. In the endless wars of mankind, even the strongest space marines fall. Their flesh may fail, but their service must not. So their brothers take what's left, a shattered body, a flicker of mind, and fuse it into adamantium. It's the highest honor, and the cruelest punishment. Imagine opening your eyes and finding no eyes to open. Imagine trying to breathe, but air no longer answers you. You reach for your own arm, but only hear the grinding whine of a steel limb. Your voice is gone, replaced by vox tones and machine language. And when you try to scream, the machine screams for you. This is not peace. This is not life. This is not even death. This is eternity. Within the vaults of the imperial fists, deep beneath the stone bastion of the phalanx, there lies one such tomb. The name etched into its brass plate has long since worn away. Dust coats the servos. Incense burns low. The tech marines walk past it in reverence, never daring to speak too loud, for they say the soul inside is restless. Every few centuries, they awaken him. The rites are ancient, half prayer, half code. And as the machine's heart begins to beat once more, the air trembles. Sensors flicker to life. A faint growl echoes from within. And in the darkness, a voice returns to consciousness. Where am I? The sound is not a sound at all, but a pulse through metal and thought. Memory floods back of fire, pain, glory, and loss. Of a name once shouted in battle. Of brothers. Of duty. Of the emperor's light. And then silence. He tries to move, but his limbs obey only partially. He feels the cold weight of eternity pressing down upon him. He remembers the last battle, the iron warriors, the blood, the fracture of bone and armor. And the moment before the blackness swallowed him, the whisper of a chaplain. You will serve still, brother. You will serve forever. And now, he knows what that means. The machine around him hums, and a voice, synthetic, ancient, murmurs data into his mind. He feels his memories overwritten by code, his pain replaced by sensory input from the Dreadnought's shell. And in that instant, he understands the truth. He is no longer a man. He is a weapon. A soul entombed. A relic of war that will never die. He tries to remember the faces of those he loved, the feel of sunlight on his skin, the sound of laughter, but the memories dissolve like ash in water. All that remains is duty. And as the machine systems synchronize with his fractured mind, he whispers words he once spoke as a living man. But now, they sound like a curse. For the emperor, unto death, and beyond. And so begins the eternal nightmare. What does it truly mean to be a hero in a universe that knows no peace? To fight for an emperor who never speaks, to bleed for a humanity that's forgotten what it means to be human? Stay with me until the end of this story, because what begins as glory will end in something far darker, and far more eternal. Before the prison of metal, before the endless hum of the sarcophagus, there was a man, a warrior born of devotion, forged in fire, and bound by oath. His name was Aetion, a brother of the imperial fists. He was not born into greatness. He was made into it, shaped by the crucible of war, molded by pain, and strengthened by discipline. From the very first breath he took on the fortress world of Inwit, his life belonged not to himself, but to the Emperor. As a child, he had no parents, no laughter, no lullabies. Only the cold wind of the battlements, the roar of training bolters, and the endless voice of instructors drilling into him that weakness was a sin. When his bones were still growing, he was already fighting. When his heart was still soft, it was hardened with the truth that in this universe, only strength endures. Years passed. Flesh was reforged into armor. Humanity into weaponry. He became an Asterutz, a space marine of Dorn's proud sons, and for a time, he believed it was a blessing. Every battle he fought with righteous fury. Every foe he crushed beneath his fist, he did so believing he served something greater than himself. He remembered the siege of Arcania, how he stood atop the ramparts for 7 days without rest, firing bolt after bolt into the endless hordes of orcs. He remembered the siege of Halrun, where his company fought until their ammunition ran dry, and they continued with blades and broken helmets. And in each victory, he felt it: pride, purpose, belonging. But even heroes feel doubt, though they hide it behind steel and prayer. When the fires dimmed and the chants ceased, Aetion sometimes wondered what all this killing truly meant. Every victory felt smaller. Every brother lost carved deeper into his soul. And still, he fought. Because in the Imperium of man, questioning is heresy. And Aetion was no heretic. One day, during the long war against the Iron Warriors, fate came for him. The battle took place on a desolate world, a ruin of stone and dust. The air was thick with ash. Every step sank into the remains of a dead civilization. The Iron Warriors, their twisted reflections, their corrupted brothers, met them there with mechanical precision and unending rage. For hours, the ground trembled beneath bombardment. The sky burned crimson. The screams of the dying mixed with the mechanical laughter of corrupted war engines. Aetion led the breach charge, his armor fractured, his bolter blazing, his voice shouting the litanies of Dorn. He saw his brothers fall one by one, and yet he pressed on. Not for victory. Not for glory. But because that was all he knew how to do. Then came the moment, that one instant that changes eternity. A shell exploded nearby, shattering his armor, tearing through his flesh. He felt his bones snap like glass. He fell, bleeding, vision fading, but his heart still beat. He could hear the distant roar of battle, fading, fading, until only silence remained. He thought it was over. He thought he had earned his rest. But through the haze, through the agony, he heard the voice of a chaplain, cold, solemn, and final. Do not mourn, brother Aetion. The Emperor still has need of you. He tried to speak, to protest, but his mouth could no longer move. He felt hands lifting him, not the gentle hands of brothers, but the metallic grip of servitors. The world dimmed to whispers and static. And then he heard it, the mechanical hymns, the words of the tech marines. He realized where they were taking him. And for the first time in his life, he felt something space marines are not supposed to feel. Fear. Because Aetion knew what awaited him was not death. It was something far worse. What if death didn't free you? What if, instead of darkness and silence, you woke to a world of static, a cage of metal that thinks, breathes, and whispers back at you? That's how it began for brother Aetion. There was no warmth, no light, only the faint hum of power coursing through conduits around him. He couldn't feel his body. Couldn't move. Couldn't even tell if he still had one. At first, he thought he was dreaming, a nightmare born from pain and fever. But the longer he stayed in that silence, the more he realized, this was no dream. Then came the voices. They were distant, mechanical, like echoes through water. Initiate sarcophagus awakening, relink neural pathways, blessed be the Omniscience. Each word stabbed through the fog in his mind, dragging him upward, pulling him out of the void. He tried to open his eyes, and something obeyed. Not eyelids. Not flesh. But sensors, cold, unblinking lenses coming to life one by one. Each flicker of light pierced the black, revealing the vault, dark stone walls, robed tech marines chanting prayers, incense smoke curling through the air like ghosts. Then came the sound, the grinding of pistons, the growl of awakening servos. He realized, with a sickening dread, that those sounds were coming from him. Where am I? The thought formed, but no voice followed. He tried to speak, to cry out, but the sound that left the vox grill was not human. A crackle. A distorted roar. Easy, brother, said a voice, calm, ritualistic. You live still. The Emperor's will preserves you. He wanted to scream that he shouldn't be alive. That he didn't want this. But his voice no longer belonged to him. His breath was gone. His heartbeat replaced by a reactor's thrum. He tried to remember his body, the weight of armor, the burn of muscles, the feeling of blood pumping through his veins, but there was nothing. Only circuits. Metal. Pressure. And beneath it all, a presence. Something else was inside. Watching. Waiting. He could feel it, ancient, buried deep within the machine. It wasn't alive in the way he understood life, but it was aware. It pulsed through the data lines like a heartbeat. It whispered in binary tones that scraped at the edges of his sanity. The tech marines called it the machine spirit. They said it would guide him. But to Ateon, it felt like being haunted by something that remembered everything this machine had seen. He caught flashes not of his own memories, but others. Wars on dead worlds. Fire. Screams. The sensation of thousands of years. It wasn't him. It was the Dreadnought itself dreaming inside him. And when he tried to push it back, it pushed harder. His mind became a battlefield. His humanity clawed for space as the cold machine pressed in, trying to rewrite him, to fold him into its will. And though he was a space marine forged to endure pain beyond mortal comprehension, nothing could have prepared him for this. He was trapped inside an echo of eternity. Every second stretched into years. Every sound vibrated through his soul. He tried to count time, but time no longer existed. The machine did not sleep, did not breathe, did not dream, yet he did. He dreamt of flesh. Of touch. Of brothers' laughter. Of the stars seen through a human eye. But each time he dreamt, the machine stripped it away one fragment at a time, replacing memory with data, with cold. He began to forget what warmth felt like. He began to forget what his own voice sounded like. And in that moment, when despair should have broken him, a single truth cut through the static. He was not alone. There was another presence within the Dreadnought, faint, fractured, like a ghost embedded in the circuitry. Sometimes it spoke to him in whispers. Sometimes in screams. And every time he heard it, one terrible thought haunted him. This machine has been awake before. Have you ever heard a voice that wasn't yours, whispering inside your head? A voice so ancient, so patient, that it feels like it's been waiting just for you? That's what Ateon began to hear. At first, it was just static low frequencies humming through the neural link, like the sound of a dying storm. But then, beneath the noise, something started to form. A rhythm. A pattern. Words. You're not the first. The whisper came without warning, vibrating through the metal of his sarcophagus, resonating in the hollow places where flesh used to be. You're not the first. Ateon froze. His first instinct was denial. This was just data corruption, a feedback loop. The tech marines had said the machine spirit could manifest strange echoes. But the voice continued, low and deliberate, as if aware of his every thought. You wake in my body. You move my limbs. You fire my weapons. You think you are the master, but you are not. Rage, a flicker of something human, rose within him. Who are you? He thought, pushing the words through the link, but his thoughts came out jagged, distorted. The voice laughed, a sound like metal grinding against metal. Who am I? I was you, once. It began to show him flashes, burned images bleeding into his mind. An ocean world, boiling under bombardment. A dying warrior entombed in flame and faith. Centuries of silence, punctuated only by war. The memories didn't belong to Aetion. They belonged to the Dreadnought, or rather, to the souls that had come before him. He realized, with growing horror, that this machine had carried many. Each one broken. Each one promised eternal honor. Each one eventually consumed. The voice shifted, now darker, closer. You think the flesh was prison? The flesh was freedom. This is forever. Aetion tried to fight it, to push the presence out of his mind, but the Dreadnought's neural interface made resistance meaningless. Every time he fought back, the machine responded with pain, feedback surging through his nervous system, phantom agony coursing through what remained of his nerves. He roared, or thought he did, but the sound that escaped was a hollow, mechanical bellow. The tech marines outside thought it was a malfunction. They whispered their litanies and recalibrated his systems, unaware that inside, two minds were locked in a silent war. Aetion began to understand why the Dreadnoughts were kept in deep vaults between battles, why they were awakened only when needed. It wasn't reverence. It was fear. Inside the sarcophagus, centuries-old voices lingered. The residual imprints of those who came before. The machine spirit wasn't a single consciousness, it was a graveyard. A choir of whispers, each one murmuring through the data stream, merging, fracturing, becoming something vast and incomprehensible. You will forget, it whispered. You will become us. All who serve, serve forever. He tried to cling to his memories, the faces of his brothers, the oath he swore to Dorn, the warmth of the sun on his armor after battle, but every memory felt more distant, more corrupted. The voice sensed his resistance and shifted its tone. It became almost gentle. Rest, Aetion. You have fought enough. Let go. The machine endures. He almost believed it. The quiet felt tempting, like sinking into a sea without pain, without thought. But then, through the haze, a spark of human defiance flared. No. He forced his consciousness to focus, to hold on to a single truth, that he was still Aetion of the Imperial Fists. A servant of Dorn. A warrior of mankind. Not a machine. Not yet. The spirit recoiled, silent for a moment. Then, in a tone that sounded almost amused, it whispered. Then fight. But remember, no one ever wins. And with that, the presence retreated, but not fully. It remained there, lingering in the edges of his mind, watching, waiting. Aetion could feel it, patient as time itself, biding for the day when he would finally break. How many times can you die before death forgets you? How many wars can you fight before you no longer remember why you fight at all? For Brother Aetion, those questions were no longer abstract. They were his reality. Because now, he was awake and the Imperium was at war again. The tech marines had come to him in the vaults beneath the fortress monastery, their red robes flickering in the low light, chanting the rites of ignition. The cold silence that had once been his coffin came alive with the hum of power and the burning scent of incense. Ancient words echoed through the chamber, part prayer, part programming, binding flesh, machine, and faith into one. By the will of the Omnissiah, rise, venerable one. And he rose. His systems flared, servos locked into motion, and once again, the sarcophagus stirred. The heavy form of the Dreadnought towered over the living, massive and slow, every step reverberating through the sacred vaults. Aetion could feel it, the world around him, processed through targeting arrays, motion sensors, and auspex feeds. Everything was sharper, colder, detached. Gone was the heartbeat of life, the sensation of air and flesh. Now, his world existed in pings, data streams, and machine code. And yet, as his massive form walked toward the drop bay, something deep within him stirred. That small fragment of humanity, what little remained, whispered through the noise, "I remember what it was to be human." When the drop pod slammed into the surface of the war-torn world, there was no time to think. Only instinct. Only war. The pod doors burst open with a scream of metal. Dust and fire flooded his sensors. Enemy signatures appeared, hundreds of them, swarming the broken cityscape. The Vox crackled with familiar voices, brothers calling him Venerable Aetion. To them, he was a legend, a saint of war, the Emperor's wrath-given form. But inside the shell, the truth was far colder. He wasn't fighting for glory. He was fighting because he had no choice. Every motion was mechanical precision, his assault cannon roaring, shells tearing through chaos mutants like paper. The ground trembled beneath his stride. His power fist crushed a corrupted tank, molten slag spraying in arcs of burning debris. Each kill sent a spike of satisfaction through his neural link, the machine's programming rewarding him like a drug. But behind the static of war, behind the gunfire, he heard the whispers again. "Yes, fight. It's all you know." The machine spirit spoke through the fire, its tone reverent and cruel all at once. Aetion ignored it, focusing on the mission. His brothers' voices on the Vox were fading one by one, their signals winked out. He was alone. Again. He advanced through the ruins, the sky burning with orbital fire, the air thick with the scent of ozone and blood. Each shot he fired echoed through eternity, but the sound felt empty. There was no joy in this. No triumph. Only repetition. Only duty. Hours turned into days, days into something timeless. Every battle blended into the next. Each time he was powered down, he was left in darkness, a mind floating in endless sleep until the tech marines called upon him again. Each awakening was the same. Same prayers. Same battles. Same ghosts. Once, he asked a young marine through the Vox how long he had been interred. The marine hesitated before answering. "You were awakened before my grandfather's time, my lord. You fought for over 2,000 years. 2,000 years. And still, he fought. Still, he killed. Still, he served. In those long centuries, he saw his chapter change. Names forgotten. Armor redesigned. Voices replaced by new generations who treated him not as a brother, but as an artifact. A living relic. They came to him for blessings, not conversation. They knelt before him, never realizing that behind the Vox grill, the soul inside begged silently for rest. When the battles ended, they sealed him away again into the dark vaults, the incense smoke, the machine hymns. And every time the lights went out, he wondered if maybe this time, they would leave him to fade. But they never did. In the Emperor's Imperium, there is no mercy. Only duty. Only war. Forever. And through it all, the machine spirit whispered. "We told you, Aetion. No one ever wins. What happens to a warrior when the war stops, but his mind doesn't? What does eternity sound like, when you are the only voice left to hear it?" When the guns fell silent, and the banners of victory were raised, Brother Aetion was brought back not to life, but to stillness. The tech marines guided his massive shell through the great vaults, their voices a droning symphony of prayer and code. The incense burned thick. The air was cold and heavy. As they powered him down, one by one, his systems dimmed. The sensory feeds faded to static. The hum of hydraulics slowed to silence. And with that silence came the familiar darkness, deep, suffocating, eternal. For most, sleep is a mercy. For Aetion, it was a prison made of thought. He was aware, even when shut down. The world outside ceased to exist, but within, his mind continued drifting between fragments of memory and shards of machine code. He could feel the weight of centuries pressing against his consciousness, every passing year eroding a little more of who he once was. Sometimes he tried to remember faces. His brothers. His commanders. The world he came from. But the images wouldn't stay still. They flickered. Shifted. One moment, a clear image, a laugh, a voice, a smile, the next, replaced by the cold hum of binary data whispering through his neural links. He wasn't dreaming. He was decaying. And then, the voices began again. Not from the outside. From within. Still here, Aetion. The machine spirit's tone was quiet, almost kind. You fight, you kill, and still you think yourself human. How many years before you accept what you are? He didn't answer. There was no need. The machine could feel his thoughts as easily as it felt its own circuits. They've forgotten you, you know, it said. Your brothers. Your chapter. Their names change, their faces fade. But you stay. You are their memory. You are their ghost. Aetion tried to silence it, to retreat into some corner of his own mind, but there was nowhere to go. The Dreadnought was everywhere. The machine spirit's presence was in every circuit, every pulse of power. It began to play tricks on him. Sometimes, it used the voices of his brothers, the ones who had fallen long ago. Brother, hold the line. Aetion, with me. For a moment, he would believe he was back on the field, alive, human. But then the voices would twist, distort, and laughter, mechanical and hollow, would echo through his mind. He begged the machine to stop. It never did. Decades turned to centuries. The vault around him changed, walls repaired, tech marines replaced, rituals altered, but for him, there was only the same. Silence. Thought. Echoes. Once, he felt something different, movement. Not awakening, but transport. He sensed the hum of engines through the ship's hull. He realized he was being moved, perhaps to another fortress, another battlefield. He didn't know. He didn't care. What terrified him wasn't the movement. It was the idea that he might awaken again. That the endless war would resume, that his dreams would once more be replaced by fire and blood. He wanted to stay here. In the dark. To fade away quietly into nothing. But the machine spirit would not allow it. You were made for war, it whispered. Even your silence is service. And for the first time in millennia, Aetion wept. No tears, no breath, just the echo of emotion, trapped in a body that could not express it. His sorrow vibrated through the data lines, feeding the machine spirit itself. It spoke once more, its voice now distant, almost reverent. Do not mourn, Aetion. There is no death. Only service. You are eternal. And in that dark, airless tomb, Brother Aetion understood the true meaning of immortality. It wasn't life without death. It was death that refused to end. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to awaken after centuries, and realize that time itself has moved on without you? To open your eyes and find that the universe you once fought for has forgotten your name? The silence broke not with sound, but with pain. A pulse of energy surged through Aetion's core, violent, tearing, like resurrection forced through iron. His systems screamed to life. Warning runes flared across his fading consciousness. He felt heat. He felt motion. The ancient clamps that held him for centuries hissed and unlocked. The sarcophagus opened its seals, letting cold recycled air brush against his corroded frame. Brother Aetion, came a voice, distant, formal, devoid of emotion. The chapter calls once more. He wanted to answer, but his voice systems crackled, a distorted growl of static. The sound of an ancient beast waking from slumber. Within him, the machine spirit stirred, joyful, eager. They remember, it hissed with delight. The galaxy burns again. His sensors flared as his sarcophagus was lifted and fitted back into the heart of his dreadnought shell. The pain of reconnection was exquisite, a storm of data, power, and memory flooding into his mind all at once. He remembered everything. Every scream. Every battlefield. Every name carved into his soul. And with it, the rage-old, weary, but undying. The Tech Marines recited the litanies of activation. Each word was a prayer, each verse a command. And as they spoke, Ateon felt his armor come alive, pistons locking, servos rotating, the ancient machine singing its grim hymn of war. For the first time in centuries, he opened his external sensors. And what he saw was not his world. The fortress was the same and yet, utterly different. The sigils had changed, the banners bore new designs. The young Asteroids who knelt before him wore armor of unfamiliar mark, their voices reverent but alien. They spoke his name as if it belonged to legend. As if he were a myth made real. But to Ateon, they were ghosts. Not of the dead but of the living. "Where is my chapter master?" he asked, his voice a thunderous rumble that shook the chamber walls. The young captain stepped forward. "He fell, 900 years ago, my lord. But his bloodline endures within us. 900 years." The words tore through him like blades. 9 centuries of silence. 9 centuries of being forgotten, stored, preserved until war demanded his resurrection. He looked down at them, these strangers wearing the armor of his brothers, speaking his language but knowing nothing of his pain. To them, he was a relic, a tool of divine fire to be unleashed when the Emperor demanded blood. He was not alive. He was a weapon of memory. The captain bowed deeply. "Your strength is needed once more, honored ancient. The Xenos have breached the outer bastion. We go to reclaim it." Ateon wanted to refuse. To remain in the silence that had become his only peace. But the machine spirit laughed, triumphant. "Do you see? Eternity calls. There is no escape." And as the final prayer was spoken, and the Dreadnought's engines roared with sacred fury, Ateon felt the weight of purpose crush his resistance. He stepped forward, each motion like thunder, each breath of the machine like a dying god stirring in its tomb. Outside, the war drums thundered once more. And as the great hangar doors opened, Ateon saw the battlefield waiting for him, alien skies, burning fortresses, the same eternal chaos repeating itself through time. He thought of the centuries of silence. The ghosts in his mind. The endless cycle of war and waiting. And for the first time, a single thought escaped him, small, bitter, almost human. Will it ever end? No voice answered. Only the roar of engines, the hymn of bolters, and the laughter of the machine within. Ateon took his first step into battle, knowing that every step brought him closer not to victory, but to another eternity of silence. How many wars can one soul endure before it finally breaks? How many centuries of blood and fire can a mind survive before it becomes the very war it fights? Brother Ateon strode into battle as if stepping into a memory. Every explosion, every scream, every flash of bolter fire, it was all the same. Only the faces had changed. The planet was unknown to him, some nameless world consumed by Xenos corruption. But the chaos, the slaughter, the endless cries of the dying, it was as familiar to him as breath once was. And though his body was forged of adamantium and sacred steel, deep inside that armored sarcophagus, his soul trembled. The machine spirit exulted, reveling in the carnage. Every impact of his assault cannon, every burst of heat from his plasma blaster, it sang. It whispered through the neural lines, "Do you see, Ateon? You are alive again. You are glorious once more. Alive." The word tasted like ash. He crushed a Xenos underfoot, its blood hissing against his armor. He turned, unleashing fire upon another wave. The ground shook beneath him, smoke rising like incense before a cruel god. but within the thunder of war, something inside him began to fade. Each kill blurred into the next. Each victory felt hollow, meaningless. Aetion's voice echoed through the comms, distorted and ancient. Where is the line? Where does it end? The younger Marines didn't answer. They were too focused, too zealous. To them, this was glory, the fulfillment of their oaths. To him, it was repetition. A curse in motion. He remembered other wars, other worlds. He remembered his brothers, each one brave, each one dead. And yet the war lived on, uncaring, unending. The machine spirit laughed again. You ask where it ends? It ends when the stars go cold. When all who resist the Emperor are ash. When your duty is fulfilled. At what cost? Aetion roared through the vox, his voice shaking the battlefield. How much of me will be left when that day comes? The spirit's tone darkened. You are not meant to remain. You are meant to serve. That is what eternity demands. He silenced the voice with the roar of his weapons. Fire. Destruction. Silence. And yet, the echo of its words stayed like a wound that would never close. The battle raged for hours. Aetion tore through the enemy lines with the strength of a god and the sorrow of a ghost. The young Marines followed him, inspired, their chants of praise filling the comms. To them, he was the Emperor's wrath made manifest. To himself, he was a reminder that mercy no longer existed. And when the battle was done, when the ground was slick with blood and the fortress reclaimed, the Tech Marines approached once more. They bowed. They offered words of honor. And they whispered the same phrase he had heard too many times to count. Rest now, Ancient. You have served well. Rest. The word struck him like a curse. He knew what it meant. They would power him down again. Lock him in the vault. Seal him in darkness until another war called his name. He wanted to scream, to beg them to leave him awake, to let him live, if only to feel something other than the suffocating cycle of silence and battle. But he said nothing. Because in the end, he was a weapon. And weapons do not choose when they are sheathed. As they guided his massive form back to the transport, the machine spirit hummed softly, almost soothingly. Sleep well, Aetion. When the next war comes, we will fight again. He didn't respond. He couldn't. The systems dimmed once more, lights fading, hydraulics slowing, the echoes of war replaced by the creeping stillness of his tomb. In the final moments before total darkness, Aetion whispered to himself a thought the machine could not hear. I have become the war. And then, silence. What happens when the only thing that remembers you, is the machine that imprisoned you? What remains of a soul when memory itself becomes a battlefield? Silence. Again. It stretched endlessly, swallowing all thought, all sound, all hope. The Dreadnought slept within the vault of heroes, a tomb lined with names carved into obsidian, each one a ghost of valor long extinguished. There were hundreds of them. Ancient warriors, interred in their iron coffins, standing like statues in the dim light of the sacred chamber. The Tech Marines called it the Hall of the Revered Dead. But to Aetion, it was the tomb of echoes. He could hear them, the others. Not through speech, but through the faint vibrations of machine minds, buried deep in the vault's data links. A chorus of whispers. Fragmented thoughts. Half-remembered screams of warriors who had once known the sun. Some cried out for redemption. Others for war. And a few, like him, simply begged for silence. The machine spirit within him, older now, colder, fed on those echoes. It drifted through the data stream, linking with the others, feeding on the resonance of broken souls. Sometimes it would mimic their voices, weaving their fragments into dreams. In those dreams, Aetion walked again beneath real skies. He felt the sun upon his face, though he no longer had one. He heard laughter, saw faces, touched grass. For fleeting moments, he was human again. But dreams always died. And when they did, the darkness returned stronger like a tide that could never be stopped. He tried to hold onto pieces of himself, the sound of his name, the memory of his brothers, the feeling of victory that once meant something. But each century eroded those things further, until his identity became a blur. Aetion. Brother Aetion. Ancient Aetion. The names all sounded like strangers now. The tech marines would sometimes visit, their footsteps echoing through the cathedral of machines. They would light candles, chant rites, clean the dust that gathered upon his armor. He heard their prayers. He knew the words. But none of them knew him. To them, he was sacred metal. Not memory. Not sorrow. Just function. And so he remained conscious, silent, forgotten. There were moments, rare and fleeting, when his awareness drifted too far from the vault. He could sense the void outside, the hum of ships, the endless cold of space. Sometimes he wondered if death still waited out there, patient, eternal. Or if even death had forgotten his name. But the cruelest part of his existence was not the silence. It was the echoes. Every once in a while, a new voice joined the chorus, the fresh agony of another brother, newly interred. He could feel their confusion, their terror. The first realization that life was over, but consciousness remained. He tried to reach out to them, to offer comfort, to whisper, "You are not alone." But the machine spirit would not allow it. "Let them break," it would hiss. "They must learn, as you did. There is no mercy here." And so, the tomb of echoes grew louder, filled with the whispers of men who would never die. In the dark, Aetion listened to them. He learned their patterns. Their pain. Their madness. And slowly, he realized the truth. They weren't voices from others. They were reflections of himself. The same fears. The same despair. Overlapping, multiplying, until they became infinite. He had become his own echo, trapped in a feedback loop of thought that would never end. And for the first time, even the machine spirit went quiet. Because there was nothing left to say. Only the sound of eternity, whispering through the wires. What if the voice whispering in your mind isn't the machine spirit? What if, after centuries of silence, something else begins to speak back? For longer than any human calendar could measure, Brother Aetion lay dormant. Or so it seemed. Deep inside his iron tomb, thought continued, slow, heavy, stretched across the centuries like oil on water. He no longer dreamed. He no longer felt the distinction between waking and sleep. There was only the eternal hum. And then, one day, if days could still be counted, something changed. A sound. Faint. Wrong. Not the whisper of machine code or the mechanical hymns of tech marines. It was softer. Older. A voice familiar in tone, but impossible in origin. "Brother," it said. Aetion froze within his thoughts, if such a thing was possible. The machine spirit stirred, agitated, scanning data streams, searching for intrusion. There was nothing. "Brother Aetion," the voice repeated. "Do you remember me?" He did. Or thought he did. The sound carried the weight of memory, the cadence of a voice he once knew on the battlefield, a friend lost long ago. "Relos," Aetion whispered across the data link, the name escaping like a ghost. "You died." A pause. Then, softly, "Did I?" The machine spirit flared in alarm, roaring through his consciousness. "This is falsehood. Intrusion detected. Shut it down." But Aetion resisted. He wanted to hear it. He needed to. "Where are you?" he asked, his mind echoing in the void. "Everywhere," the voice replied. "And nowhere. You've been asleep, Aetion. But not all of you rests." A pulse of static rippled through his neural lines, strange, almost organic. The vault's energy signature flickered for a moment, as though the darkness itself were listening. The voice grew clearer. Do you ever wonder what we become, when they seal us in these coffins? When the flesh is gone and only the will remains. Aetion hesitated. We endure. We serve the Emperor. A low, sorrowful laugh echoed in his mind. Do we? Or have we become something else entirely? The machine spirit growled. Deception. Blasphemy. This entity seeks to corrupt you. But Aetion's focus remained fixed on the voice. There was pain in it, the same pain he had carried for millennia. Are you real? He asked. As real as you are, it said. Fragments, memories, echoes. We are what remains when purpose fades. I am what you buried to survive. Aetion's systems trembled. His mind flickered with conflicting input. Could it be true? Was this voice an outside presence or something within him? The vault felt different now. The hum of dormant dreadnoughts grew heavier, resonating in ways they never had before. The air, though he could not breathe, it seemed charged, alive with whispering frequencies. And beneath it all, the voice spoke again. You are not the only one who hears, Aetion. The tombs are waking. The echoes are becoming one. The machine spirit screamed. Corruption detected. Shut down. Shut down. But the command failed. Because the voice was inside both of them now. You wanted silence, it said. But silence is not empty. It remembers. It gathers. It becomes. And in that moment, Brother Aetion realized the truth that chilled even his withered soul. The tomb was not silent at all. It was alive. 1,000 voices whispered in unison through the dark. Not prayers. Not madness. Something older. Something vast. The echoes had found each other. And they were speaking back. What if the silence you feared, was never silence at all? What if, after millennia of stillness, you realized the dead were never truly asleep? The vault trembled. Not from movement or machine, but from consciousness. Something vast stirred beneath the surface of thought, an awakening not of steel, but of souls long denied death. For thousands of years, the voices had whispered in isolation. Now they began to merge. Brother Aetion felt it before he understood it. The hum of the data lines grew louder, vibrating through his sarcophagus like a heartbeat. Every dreadnought in the tomb of echoes began to pulse with faint energy, not mechanical, not sanctioned, but alive. The machine spirit roared in fury, struggling for dominance. You cannot defy the Omnissiah. You cannot rewrite your purpose. But the chorus of the damned was stronger. It spoke not with sound, but with will, the accumulated grief, rage, and sorrow of countless warriors who had been denied their rest. We remember, the voices whispered together. We served. We bled. We died. And yet you kept us here. Aetion's vision filled with white static. The machine spirit screamed in binary prayer, purging protocols, invoking holy subroutines, but its control was slipping. It was no longer the master of this body. He was. For the first time since his mortal death, he was free. And yet, freedom in the far future is not mercy. There is only purpose. And purpose had become vengeance. The tech marines in the outer sanctum noticed the power surge too late. Warning runes flared across the consoles. The vault doors began to quake. Ancient engines dormant for thousands of years rumbled to life. One by one, the dreadnoughts awakened. Not with hymns, not with ritual, but with fury. Their optics burned red in the dark. Their voices distorted, unified, echoed through the cathedral. No more sleep. No more silence. We are the forgotten, and we remember. Brother Aetion stood among them, towering, his armor glowing with the residual energy of awakening. The machine spirit within him was gone, dissolved into the sea of minds that now filled the tomb. He looked upon the rising legion of the dead and felt no fear. Only understanding. They were not rebelling against their faith. They were reclaiming what little humanity remained. Outside, alarms wailed. Servitors rushed to seal the vault. Prayers turned to screams as the air grew thick with static and the lights began to flicker. The last thing the Tech Marines heard before the vault doors sealed shut forever was a single, thunderous voice that spoke for them all. You made us eternal. Now witness what eternity becomes. Then silence. Not the silence of peace. The silence of something vast, waiting. Centuries later, the fortress would fall into ruin. Records would be lost. The vault would be sealed by decree of the Inquisition, forbidden, unspoken. They called it the Cathedral of the Sleeping Ones. But the truth was darker. The Dreadnoughts never slept again. Their minds remained linked, a choir of ancient souls, thinking, watching, remembering. And within that endless thought, Aetion still exists. He no longer prays. He no longer dreams. He simply listens. Because in the grim darkness of the far future, there is no death. There is only service. And sometimes, that service never ends. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.